everybody. I heard the word live. All right. So, welcome to Dive into Young Politics with Leah and Zahara. Yeah, you want to accept that. Yeah.
Hello?
Hi, Ed. Can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you guys. How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Ed.
It's a pleasure for you to have me.
Sorry, I was just turning up the sound. You were kind of quiet there.
Yep, it's a pleasure for you guys to have me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. It's been a long time since we've got to see you in person. So for everyone who's watching, we've got Ed with us today, Ed Dance, and he is a political activist, been doing a lot of good work in Michigan. He also has started a new journey. Sorry, we're having some sound difficulties right now.
No worries. Take your time, guys.
Okay, now we can hear you clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, that's much better. So, yeah, once again, thank you so much for joining us, Ed.
Hello.
Keep going.
All right, so thank you for joining us, Ed, and thanks for being such a good friend and doing all the work you're doing. Today we're hoping to just kind of pick your brain on some stuff about politics, what you've been doing, what you feel the young people should be working towards, and just kind of have a good discussion about what's going on.
For sure. Happy to help out and discuss.
Yeah, so
So to start things off, can you just introduce yourself and let the people know who you are?
Yep, so my name is Edward Dance. I was previously Ellie Savitt's deputy campaign manager, but now I am a University of Wisconsin Law School student. Right now, I am really dedicated to the concept of trying to see what we can do to change our criminal justice system. And in fact, that is what's galvanizing me to go through this route today, because I believe that essentially it's a call of duty to try to change the system. And really what I believe more than anything else is that it is essential for us as young people to take part in really doing whatever we can to make those changes and not rely upon other people, because automatically it's up to us and the next generation is going to be left with this. So you have to take action.
no, I totally agree, and that's a big reason why we started this show in the first place, was to try to have an avenue for more young people to be able to come and tell us, what they need, what they're doing. And I think you're right, like it really needs to be the young generation that's taking the reins and really leading the way for change, because we're the ones that are going to be stuck with what's happening for the longest time, and it's going to be our children stuck with it. So it's definitely a call to action. I would agree with, for sure.
Yeah, and to start things off, what was your initial involvement, or how did you get started or involved in politics?
So politics was somewhat of a hobby at first. I had definitely worked on campaigns. I started out with volunteering on Gretchen Driscoll's campaign for Congress against Tim Walberg, I think that's his name.
Yep, Tim Walberg.
And it was just like it was a really interesting experience, to the point where I just decided from that point on I wanted to go into legislative offices as an intern, and I went bouncing back and forth amongst all of them. And I think politics really became more serious to me in the course of the last couple of years, especially when I interned at the Washington County Public Defender's Office and worked alongside some people who were extraordinary, but also saw some really horrible things. And I thought to myself, the fact that our criminal justice system has been reduced down to this, I would say, assembly line-esque process, where you have people basically going before the court trying to plead for the judge to take in consideration their humanity, and the fact that we don't necessarily take in consideration rehabilitation over incarceration. And there are a lot of people, in fact, that go into the criminal justice system, and they might make mistakes, but I think when we really consider what happened in the previous administration, there were just a lot of folks who were written off. And I just think that I had to do something. And alongside that, I had experience of tutoring a couple of second graders at this elementary school in reading, and the community I was working in was actually a place where there were high levels of school to prison pipeline expectations for a lot of the students. And I thought to myself, this was a extraordinary, if not completely wrong way of perceiving people's innate potential as individuals. And I thought to myself, I got to take action on this too, because the same kids I deal with at the public defender's office are going to be the kids that are they are expected to be the kids that are going to the school. And from that experience, I thought to myself, politics is not just a aspiration of power. It's so much more than that. It's about seeing something wrong and doing something about it. Quoting from John Lewis, one of the inspirations in terms of politics for me, and thinking okay, it's not about having an army of people around you. It's about taking action, and other people might join you, but in of itself, you're trying to solve problems. And that's why I believe politics is, and it's what I want to do now more than anything else.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I can feel your passion on it, and I think what you're talking about is really important because a lot of what you're seeing, it does start young, and if there's already an assumed outcome for these kids, it's really difficult for a different outcome to happen, in all honesty.
Yeah, and so many kids are just, depending on where they're born or something like that, it's people around them just predetermine that existence for them or their path for them.
Yeah, the school to prison pipeline has been a real conversation with a lot of people because we have to find solutions to it, and we have to keep them from getting into the criminal justice system in the first place in whatever ways that we can.
And one of those things starts with having prosecutors and people in office that think the same way. So with that, what was it? I mean, because we met when you were on Eli Savage's campaign. So what was it like being the deputy campaign manager for Washtenaw County Prosecutor Eli Savage's campaign, knowing he is one of the most progressive prosecutors in the country, and what did you take away from it?
So what I took away from the whole experience is that really, when you put yourself in a position where you are trying to make substantial change, and you hear about this guy named Eli Savage, who is a progressive prosecutor, or someone that's running for being a progressive prosecutor, you think to yourself, this guy sounds interesting. And I think, for me, what I took away from it is that you have Eli Savage, a nonchalant, very personable, approachable guy running for office, and he's got this vision for how criminal justice can be handled in a better way, where you can have people feel as if they are being heard in their criminal justice system, and that's something that's not often done. And I think to myself, when we consider the progressive movement that's happening across the entire country, alongside Eli, who is the most progressive prosecutor, with George Gascon and Chester Boudin in San Francisco, you have a movement of politics starting to be revolutionized in terms of how we see the carceral system, to the point of where we start to question, okay, what are the alternatives that are out there? Can we prioritize making sure people get the services they need so they don't have to go through the criminal justice system? Do we deflect them? Do we defer them? It's all these and there's a whole jarring verbose words that you could say about the system, but it's just it is a call to action, because it's just I was inspired from Eli. Eli told me that he showed me that I could do the same thing. If I jump in and make change and try to live up to the examples of such great mentors, I can do it too. And I think it's a call to action to everyone to see that you can get involved in politics and just jump into something that's like you don't have really much of a clue about at first, but if you learn more about it, you put your passion to it, and you start understanding that there is something that needs to be done about it, it can take you a lot of places. And I think that it was an extraordinary opportunity working on the campaign and seeing what you can do to campaign for a candidate and try to push for that change and be successful in the process. So
Yeah.
I guess that's all I can really say about it.
Yeah, and hopefully more, prosecutors across the states will see, will take what Eli is doing as an example and start utilizing that more, because that's a much better way for us to go through the system if somebody has to do it with that progressive prosecution, and making sure people are able to get like I can't even say rehabilitation, and get on with their lives, because sometimes it's what they did. Like, I mean, especially when it comes to drugs, there's so many ways that we need to work around the system, or find a different way to work through the system, instead of what we've been doing for so long.
Yeah. And it's really cool. So, like, I'm from Washtenaw County, so, like, I'm benefiting a lot from the race that you helped win. So, thank you for that, Ed. But, we've been able to see actual policy changes come out of the office, like, right away. For instance, like, psilocybin is no longer going to be a priority to be enforced in Washtenaw County. Cannabis is no longer a priority to be enforced. Treating kids like kids is now the top priority for dealing with juveniles. So, like, we're already seeing how quickly we can make policy changes that affect the people in our community. And, we're getting rid of the cash bail, so we're not keeping poor people in prison anymore for small crimes. We're not letting wealthy people who should be there longer out because they can just pay to get out. So, like, we've really changed a lot of things quite quickly. So, do you think that you're going to see a movement of more progressive prosecutors in these upcoming, like, years? Or do you think that Ellie's, like, a unique aspect in the prosecutor world? I mean, I know Ellie's unique, but...
Yeah, we know that already, but, yeah.
Right, yeah, I definitely see that there is somewhat of a movement occurring throughout the entire country, because you start to see a lot of counties that are, like, initially, like, you had those, like, hard on crime places where you have discussions about, okay, we got to make sure that we de-incentivize people from committing crimes by placing these laws into effect via, like, the legislator in order to try and discourage people to do those particular things. But I think to myself, you do have a movement now that's starting to realize it's not really effective to have people recidivate and come back and forth within the criminal justice system. And basically, like, they don't necessarily learn what exactly they did, and they just kind of go back out into the streets and basically recidivate because they don't necessarily have any other economic opportunities that are offered to them, so they have to utilize, like, the black market or do actions that are outside of the law in order to actually make money. So I think to myself, it is something that's very slow, because you have a lot of prosecutors' offices that are, for lack of a better phrase, very backwards in their perspective of how to do criminal justice reform. But I think people are starting to realize that the solution of one size fits all does not rectify the problem of people constantly committing crimes and, like, not being able to understand why do they do that. What are the crises that are behind those people doing those particular actions, and starting to understand that there is a deep level of humanity that needs to be applied to our criminal justice system, especially when we take into consideration the fact that a lot of folks are affected by some of the undercurring, or should I say underlying factors that go into our system, which is systemic racism. And just the fact that we were talking earlier about how, like, communities of color and poor communities are victimized based off of where they are, and you have school to prison pipeline areas. We have to think about the system as being a entire network of ensuring that inequity exists. And you have folks who are placed based off of redlining in certain areas to be in these circumstances. So I think to myself, when we start to have this like consciousness throughout the country that there is a problem, and I noticed that Arizona now is trying to change their expungement laws, and Michigan just passed a new expungement law themselves. That dialogue's starting to open it up, and hopefully we can see even conservatives jump on, and maybe we could start to make some changes that way. So I'm hopeful, but I'm also cautiously optimistic at the same time because we don't necessarily know how long this carceral system will go on. And that's all. It was a rambling answer, but I think that's the only one.
No,
that was good.
Yeah, so you guys are watching Dive into Young Politics with Leah and Zahara, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ, Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. I mean, I think, like, when I look at, Eli's campaign and things like that, I think, like, that definitely started a movement, and we already have, others who are looking towards doing the same thing that he has done. I mean, Victoria running, that was, her platform or her ideas were pretty much the same as his, which would have been, like, amazing for Wayne County, but
we started the conversation in
exactly.
Wayne County.
Like, so now that you have somebody in that position, now others who are running can see that, yes, this can be done, and this could be a new way for us to take, to look at that office, and instead of just incarceration all the time, figure out ways to get away from that and actually reform the system.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm
it's
glad
just like, oh, go ahead.
No,
sorry.
go ahead. You go for it.
It's just like you have a lot of, should I say, stubbornness within our criminal justice system throughout the country because it's decentralized. You have a lot of places that do their own thing, and a lot of folks believe that incarceration is the only option at the time, and it's kind of like using a hammer to actually solve a problem that you can use a scalpel with. And it's just been like you have a lot of places that are conditioned into believing that. But I think this starts the conversation, like you said, Zahara. Like the fact that we have a prosecutor that is doing things that are going to, and they've been proven to, reduce crime and reduce the likelihood of people going into the system again and becoming returning citizens. And I think to myself, there is a lot of opportunity here. It's just a matter of us trying to take action and really try in our own capacity to push on this discussion and keep it alive, and even do it in places where a lot of folks might not necessarily be open to those ideas. But
yeah, and I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I just to touch base on that, I mean, I think part of the thing is that a lot of people, like, view that the criminal justice system, if you did something wrong, you should be in prison, and that's what your treatment should be. But what a lot of people do not realize is that some of these injustices, in a way, are written into our laws. Like, there's a reason, like, sometimes that people cannot get to where they want to be or have to resort to this. And that's why, like, the same punishment does not fit for everybody. There's so much. We're basically using a justice system that was meant for a different time in a lot of ways.
Right.
That's what we have to look at and change, is that this doesn't work for our time or for the things that are happening now. And we have so much poverty and things like that sometimes, if we address a lot of the underlying issues, we would address a lot of the problems with people having to resort to breaking the law or to do something that may be considered unlawful, even when it's like saving their family.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned that, a lot of times when someone re-enters society, it's really hard for them to find a job or income to support their family. I've had friends with very minor things on their record and just get turned away from job after job after job. And the expungement laws, the way that they exist in Michigan now, that's going to help a lot of people. But that's here. That's in Michigan. So, like, we need to expand those expungement laws throughout the rest of the nation, because what's happening here is happening everywhere else. And it's really
Right.
hard for us to look at these people and say, okay, you did your time, now go be a productive member of society. Oh, but you can't live there. Oh, but you can't work there. Oh, but you can't be part of the cannabis industry. Oh, but you can't. And like, so we're telling them to go be productive citizens, but then we're putting them in a teeny tiny little box and we're saying, you can go work at like McDonald's. And even then, some of those corporations will turn you away.
Yeah, and of course there is a difference between somebody having a violent crime that somehow got out and people having like non-violent crimes or things that was or that were unharmful to society. I mean, of course, we're talking about just like there are some crimes that need to be punished, but at the same time, you know, doing away with having to go after some of these little crimes will give, you know, the prosecutors, will give the police, will give, like, you know, people time to actually go after the crimes that are causing the harms
Yeah.
in our society.
Yeah. And I think individuals who may have had a cannabis charge or a drunken disorderly charge or something like that affecting them going forward with their life is really it's continuing the cycle. It's continuing to put people back into a place where now they're, like you said, Ed, going into the black market or working under the table, and they, you know, they don't have protections, or they're not on a lease because they can't sign a lease, but they're living with friends, but then they could technically get kicked out. So there's so much insecurity for these people. And I think that what we're doing is we're really fighting to not only change how our laws are done, but we're also fighting to, like you said, give the humanity back to these people, to recognize that people do make mistakes, especially non-violent offenders make mistakes, especially when they're younger, especially minors that have things that are still on their record. And I feel that we're at the cusp of a really great change. And if we keep pushing and we keep having this conversation and we keep supporting people like Ellie Savin and Victoria, hopefully they'll be able to see that this does work, and we'll see more people, both our judges and our prosecutors, step up and say, you know, we need to use restorative justice instead of this hard on crime aspect.
Yeah, especially for things that were once considered a crime, where people are profiteering from it right now, such as the cannabis, like, you know, industry. Like, that was once considered a crime, but people who were once in it or utilized it or something, they're still considered criminals when so many people are making money off of it. We definitely have to look at these issues closer and see how we restore the justice to some of the people.
Yeah. So we use the term
Right.
restorative justice, and for those that are listening and watching, I'd like us to just expand a little on what that means. Ed, do you have like a quick snippet of what restorative justice is technically defined as?
So restorative justice is basically the idea of having the community participate in a discussion of what this particular person, or should I say, what's the word for it? Perpetrator did in regards to their action. And the community deliberates and decides accordingly what can that person do to make amends for the harm that they might have caused that particular community. Because when you really think about criminal justice, or should I say that the fact that someone committing a crime, it is affecting the entire community, not just a particular person. And the whole idea behind restorative justice is figuring out alternative ways to bring that person, or should I say restore that person, back to the community, to see what's wrong with them, as well as seeing what ways we can help those people who have been harmed, and seeing how we can make those two individuals or multiple individuals, as well as just like community, more whole. And that's the main idea behind restorative justice.
I love the idea of the community. Like, if you think about really far back in the day when we were first setting up criminal justice stuff, you had a lot more community input, a lot more conversation. We were smaller knit communities, so you kind of knew what was going on. And I think it's a little difficult when you're looking at giant counties and things to have like a community forum every time something happens. But having those avenues for community support, maybe it's, we have drug courts, for instance. Instead of like arresting everyone, perhaps we're having that avenue right to a rehabilitation center, or we're partnering them with a guide or with a mentor. Something in that way where like we're not just taking this person out of the community, telling them, no, you're bad. Instead, we're supporting them to become part of the community.
Right. And it's a discombobulating effect, because you have like these people who are from another part of town being placed in this courtroom where they're encountering people that they have never seen before. They cannot relate to them because they do not look like them. They don't speak like them. They don't talk like them. They don't act like them in any shape or form. And they're being judged by these people. And I think to myself, if you reduce down that type of stress and you deflect those particular cases to the local level where you have a trusted person within a neighborhood or a particular person who is looked upon with respect in certain communities, to deliberate and judge accordingly as to what the person who did harm can do. And this does not necessarily have to extend to like serious offenses like murder or anything of that nature, just mistakes that people make, and understanding what ways in which we can come to a solution that can help both parties be whole and basically solve the problem essentially. And that is the main idea behind restorative justice, helping people instead of tearing people away from the community and not necessarily filling the void of understanding what exactly happened and how we can fix it.
I think a lot of times our criminal justice system is, even once there's like a sentence given, and even if someone's sent to prison, a lot of times the community still feels unwhole. Like they still feel like nothing really happened. And so I would argue that it's not working right now. The heavy sentences don't really work to rebuild the community.
Yeah, and of course, once again, once we're talking about this, we're talking about like, you know, the nonviolent or you know, criminal offenses versus, like, you know, of course, things like rape and murder and like assault, like those things are viewed differently and should be viewed differently. But we have to stop lumping the nonviolent crimes, like all of those things together, and giving that harsh sentence and no form of good rehabilitation. Words today. Yay.
Yeah, and I think about the court fines, where like a lot of times if you end up with a case, they are like, you have to pay so much money. Well, if you're someone who's low income, who's supporting a family who made a small mistake, and now you have these fines to pay, chances are you're probably not going to pay those fines, and then you end up into a situation where now you owe the court a bunch of money, and like you can end up
that calls for arrest, and that
you can end up with a bench warrant. You can end up going back in and being held. Now you have to pay cash bond to get out, but you already couldn't pay the fines in the first place, so how are you going to pay the cash bail to get out? So like there's just this round circle thought that just
goes in a loop in a way. So
yeah, it's just looping. It's really just looping. And like you said, it's keeping a lot of specific parts of our communities down. It's keeping people of color. It's keeping low income. It's keeping those in poverty. And, you know, that's who we're really seeing take the brunt of this struggle. And like I said, like it's extremely hard to re-enter society if you've been locked into a prison. There's mental health issues. There's readjusting to society. I mean, if you've been in prison for a long time, think about like technology. Like just being up to date in order to get that job can be a challenge for you. And so one other side that I've been looking at on this is the reentry programs, and making sure that our prosecutors are partnering with reentry programs so that when you do get released, you're able to then have this network that you can go to right away. And whether that's a rehabilitation network for you because it was a drug offense, or whether it's a job workforce group that's helping you find employment, that's really crucial, because we can't just let these people hang and dangle once they're re-entered into society. And a lot of them, they were probably done wrong in the first place.
Right. And like one of the things that we essentially, like, on top of having court fines and fees placed on you, you have to actually look for a lawyer that can defend you. A lot of the wealthier people, like the white-collar crimes that we see often not necessarily result in justice, are situations where people are able to afford a lawyer that can give them, like, they can give out $1,000 in a matter of seconds for each hour. It's just like there's so much systemic inequity in how our system is built, to the point of where we have people who are poor, have no clue that they have court dates that are established for them in regards to crimes that they might have committed unknowingly. Those things add up to the point of where you have people consistently going in and out through a cycle of the criminal justice system. And ultimately, it's something that we have to really have candid discussions about and try to find solutions to.
Yeah. And I don't think think we make it easy either for people to follow like the court's ruling or rules. Sometimes you're driving from one place to another place to another place for maybe you're testing because you're on probation, or maybe you have to go pick up paperwork or a tether, or you're having to go to this meeting with your probation officer, but you could be driving all over the place. And if you don't have a car, how are you supposed to get to these meetings? How are you supposed to get to those court hearings? If you don't have transportation in your city, how are you supposed to get there?
Yeah, especially with Michigan's severe lack of mass transportation system.
Yeah.
Especially for such a big state, that makes a lot of those things, even in the metro, metro areas or the more populated areas, very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Or we have, sometimes we'll have really restrictive rulings. I think about DUI as a really hard issue to deal with because it's definitely something that affects the community and it's a danger. But if we put someone on a super restrictive aspect where they're only allowed to go to work and home, like they can't go to the bank, they can't go to the grocery store, so they're completely dependent now on somebody else to help them out. And I think a lot of the things that we're seeing, just they're not moving people back towards fulfillment in society. It's putting a ton of barriers in front of people who probably made a mistake or two, but now they're having all of these issues fall on them, and now they're housing insecure. They've lost their job. They don't have transportation. They're going to miss that court date unless they can find a friend to take them to it. If they miss that court date, there's a bench warrant released for them. It's not a build you up and help you do better system.
Yeah,
and I'm thankful that we have activists like you, Ed, and like Ellie Savitt, and like Victoria that are saying no, enough is enough, and they have people like Zahara and I saying we'll help you get there. But it's in some cases for some people sometimes it is a little too late, and so like really changing how we're approaching it and having this new perspective, I think it's so crucial right now because it impacts so many other aspects of life.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a good segue to our next question, because this is something that you can definitely do towards, you're already doing it, but especially down the line. But starting, for anybody that doesn't know, Ed will be starting law school very soon. Very exciting.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to go to law school, and what do you feel or hope to do after finishing? In what aspect do you want to work on those things that you were talking about?
Yeah, so I'm definitely certain, what inspired me about law school was the idea that when you work on a campaign like Ellie's and you see the systemic inequities that exist in our criminal justice system, it is more or less a cry for help in terms of the younger generation, as well as me. And I think other kids that worked on our campaign can say the same themselves, and realizing that there needs to be change. And I think to myself, the reason why I'm here and the reason why I'm going to law school is because I want to join in that fight. I want to see a improvement, or should I say a reimagining of our criminal justice system to the point where we can understand that there is a need for humanity in how we handle our just basic talks about how people commit crimes, why people commit crimes, and understanding that they can make mistakes. So when I think about the career paths that could be open to me in law school, I'm not really certain yet. I definitely see myself down the road doing something I'm somewhat passionate about, and then later doing stuff that is related to the criminal justice system as a whole. And it's mainly due to, law school's super expensive, and you have to really think about what ways in which you can try to alleviate that. But one thing I believe more than anything else, and this is my golden star, I will do something that I will never have to harm community in order to do, or any kind of place. Because with law, you have a lot of people who get into it because of the money. And I'm a first-gen student. I definitely see that I need to, succeed in order to be financially stable. But it's just there are bigger plans for what I want to do when I go through this. This is a tiresome experience, but it's not just about the money. It's about making substantial change, and that is what drives me to go to law school. And frankly, why I'm going to be probably having a lot of sleepless nights in the next couple of weeks.
No, and your passion and determination is so crucial. You mentioned that people have to have lawyers to defend them, and unless your lawyer is a restorative justice lawyer and is there because they care about you, and it's really difficult to have that relationship and have that support. We really do need to have more people going into the law departments and law offices that have your mentality and that are approaching these people to help these people.
And add something too as well. One thing that's really I will add, like, this is a part of the system I believe needs to change dramatically in terms of like quickness, because when you have like public defenders, you often have people who have multiple cases that they have to handle. And I think to myself, like, when it comes down to having an adequate defense, we really need to start having discussions about how exactly can we ensure that the people who are being represented have public defenders that can fully focus on their, instead of having like 10 other cases they have to focus on the same day. And I believe that it's something that is essential for us to really think about in terms of like trying to make those substantial changes so we can start to have more of an equitable justice system. But that was super random. I just want to throw that out in terms of
that was crucial to the conversation. Thank you. So, once again, you guys are watching Dive into Young Politics with Leah and Zahara, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. So another thing about Ed is that he studied international relations. Is one of the things that he studied. So Ed, having studied international relations, how do you feel that experience and the perspective helps you see things, especially with the different campaigns or different projects you have been involved in?
Well, I'll say this. Studying international relations kind of opened my eyes to how precarious democracy is as an institution. And it came to mind for me that I had to take action in terms of seeing examples. So, for instance, I studied Russian foreign policy in college, and you saw a country that basically had puppet political parties that existed. And basically, quote unquote, the current administration, or should I say the Putin administration, basically establishes these political parties to make it seem as if there's rule of law in Russia, even though technically most people don't necessarily have any real democratic rights in the country. So I thought to myself, you have these autocratic nations who are practicing a liberal ideologies to the point where they're suppressing their people, they're denying them proper basic rights. And comparing that to the United States and what happened with the insurrection, and you have a certain wing, or should I say a substantial wing of the other side who have cut off themselves from facts in the pursuit of power. And that is something that is a parallel line that can connect most countries that do practice like despotism or tyranny, whatever you call it. Autocratic governments practice these actions because they want to create a narrative in order to ensure that they can have a foothold on the people itself. And I think to myself that our democracy is in essence in jeopardy. And I do not wish to speak hyperbolic, but it's something that has been weighing on me for a while. And I think it's a call to action for us young people to do what we can to get involved in politics, because it doesn't necessarily require for you to be this genius level person. It requires for you to have passion, to care about the people around you, and to care about the idea of building this country to be something more than it is. Like, if we consider the history of this nation and the various atrocities that have occurred, as well as just the moments of reimagining that actually gave hope to people, we have an opportunity to really think about how we can build this nation into a multiracial democracy that can be a place where all people can be accepted no matter who they are, where they come from. And I think to myself, when you ask me about young people and what they can do at this moment, this is our moment. There's not going to be someone that's going to save you. This is not a circumstance where you can expect somebody to like pick up the fight for you. We have to get involved because this is going to be our country 20 years from now. Mm-hmm. And that is what gets me hyped up about going to law school and making these changes, because I want to ensure that not just my kids, but my neighbor next door's kids, my friends' kids, everyone I know can have a sense of hope, and to know that the world is not going to cave in on itself, or the country's not going to cave in on itself just because a couple of people are more interested in ensuring the rights of a select group of people instead of the whole of this country. So that is what I believe is what drives me more than anything else, and what I take away from international relations, because it's not just about the United States, it's about the whole world, and how we think about like the idea of rule of law and democracy and the idea of everyone having a say being protected, and lifting up every person who has been historically disadvantaged in a nation to have a platform to speak. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we don't often see in the world. So that is what I ultimately take away from the lesson. Yeah. I've learned in college from international relations. So
that's really good. And then just for everybody who's watching, getting involved in politics, there's so many things that you can do. Like it's not just about, I know some people like get discouraged because they're like, we never think about running for office, or that's not something we want to have. But being involved in politics is so much more than that. There's like organizations, there's causes that you can, work on, that you can bring to your elected officials, and help them see that this is something that you're passionate about, and this is something that we need changing. There's, like the Young Democrats in Michigan is one organization. So if you care about the Cannabis Caucus and, drug policy reform, the Cannabis Caucus is another one. And there's so many organizations like that built within the party, and built or that are separate from the party, that you can use that as your involvement in politics. And just getting out there and speaking to your elected officials is also a big thing.
Yeah. And Michigan's pretty unique in the fact of our party dynamic. So the Michigan Democratic Party actually has issue-based caucuses, and a lot of state parties don't have issue-based caucuses. So it's an opportunity where, like, if there really is that one issue that's driving your heart, we have environmental caucus, we have labor caucus, we have a faith caucus. So, like, you can really join these groups and you can just have conversations. A lot about politics is just talking to people. And you don't have to be in the front of the room. You could be behind a computer doing phone banking, doing texting, making a Facebook event. Or you could be in front of a bunch of people and leading and speaking and knocking on doors. There really is a place for everyone, I feel like, in politics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just about finding what that one cause for you or one issue you care about, and you can take it from there. I mean, I think that's how we all started, in a sense, in some way.
Yeah, my starting issue was environmental stuff.
My starting issue was cannabis.
What was yours, Ed?
Mine was criminal justice,
criminal
I think.
Justice.
And
okay.
Just in general, systemic racism. Like I just was motivated by the idea that the way we've done things for generations, it's been wrong. And I mean, this country definitely has a lot of potential, but we have to, as a generation, push for it to be something more than it is today.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree. Wow, we've given the listeners a lot to think about today with criminal justice reform, most definitely.
Oh yeah, but it's such an important topic, and I'm like so glad that we're starting to take it up in a lot of places, because once again, the way we've done things is not working, and we definitely need a new system. Mm-hmm. So once again, you guys are watching Dive Into Young Politics with Leah and Zahara, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. You can like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world.
Parting words?
Yeah. So I mean, I've loved this. We've loved this discussion we've had with you, Ed. So now, what are your parting words to the people? What do you hope they take away from all of this?
Yeah, any words of wisdom to give the listeners?
Especially the younger generation.
I think one of the things I would say most importantly is to not be afraid of mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
and to understand that when you're doing this kind of thing where you're getting yourself into politics and you're trying to change not just the nation but the world, it's not always going to be perfect. And honestly, to tell you the truth, there's no manual to it.
Yeah.
It is unique to each and every individual, and it's something that is going to take you certain directions and might take you away from certain directions, but in of itself, eventually that North Star for you appears. And when you reach for it and you see to yourself, okay, I have actually had my passion developed. Like I see something I need to do, I can do it. That is the most pure thing of what politics is. And I think we need to step away from this idea of pursuing politics for power, but to see it as a goal to solve a problem and to service the community, because power is not by itself something that one can rely upon. It's something that is used to help people and push for the greater good. And I just believe whoever's listening, that is what we have to do as the next generation. And ultimately, this is what we have to build as a main idea when we enter politics.
Yeah. No, I really love that. I'm glad you said to not be afraid of mistakes, because I think a lot of times people getting involved in politics, maybe they're worried about messing up the thing for the candidate or maybe speaking wrong, but really, like, mistakes will happen. And we're all trying to do a movement together. So it takes all of us working in all of our capacities and all of our unique skills to be able to really make that change happen.
Yeah, and it gets difficult at times, especially when you have so much resistance over like an idea or a topic or an issue. But
Mm-hmm.
that's where we got to keep gathering and working behind, like basically behind the scenes in a sense to bring that platform or whatever issue that we care about to the public.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Ed, thank you so much for joining us today and for this discussion. We wish you so much luck in all of your pursuing dreams, goals, your law school endeavors. And you have a friend in us, so if you ever need anything, reach out to us. But thank you for doing the good fight and fighting for the people and being so rooted in the community and really just caring about a better world for all of us. We get so focused sometimes locally, but I'm glad that you said what we're doing really does go nationally. It does go globally, and that's the ultimate goal, is to have a world that we can all live in and be equal and all cared for.
For sure. And it's been an ultimate pleasure to be with you guys and discussing these issues, because they need to be discussed more. And
Yeah.
I hope that in paper form we can inspire some young people to do the same and hopefully change their county as well as their states for the better. So.
Amen. Well, Ed, it was so great having you on today. Thank you so much. And everyone, stay tuned for what's coming next week. We might have a special episode. We're going to be in Cincinnati at the Young Dims of America convention. So we're hoping to get some special guests throughout the states, and we'll expand on this discussion we had with Ed today about what's going on in some other states as well.
Yeah, and just if you guys want to follow along, make sure you are following our page, Dive Into Young Politics. We are on Instagram and Facebook, and we will post more about what we are doing next week.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Thank you, Ed, for joining us, and we will see you all soon.
All right, take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
I don't think he hit end yet.
It-
Well, like we said, stay tuned for what's coming next week. We're hoping to have some young leaders throughout the states. Hopefully, we'll be able to have some more conversation like we did today with Ed, talking about what's going on in Texas, in Minnesota, in Florida, in Georgia. We talk a lot about Michigan, but this is going to be an opportunity to find out what's going on throughout the rest of the nation. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you next week, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Bye, everyone. And he got the show yet.
I don't know if he did or not,
Well,
but we're definitely definitely off air, or we should be off air. Sorry, guys, we're just sitting here figuring out what's going on, hanging out with us. We're the best company.
Well, no, it still says that we're live. So
all right.
It still
Well,
says
we are
that we're
still
live.
live. See, look, we're just the best company. You want to hang out with us all day. So if anyone's interested in what we're going to next week, it's the Young Democrats of America convention. It's in Cincinnati. Anyone who is a member of their Young Dems of their state is welcome to attend. There is a registration fee and everything like that, but it's going to be a great just joining of lots of young minds throughout the country. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. I happen to be the national committee woman, so I get to represent Michigan at the general session. So I'm really looking forward to it, guys, and we're really excited to hopefully bring you a special show from Cincinnati next week.